Da, 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 da. It's Orlando Magic. It's a season preview. Michael Bolton, I can't wait to hear your rendition of the song.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and... Oh, that must be Nigel with the Brie. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms. So give it a double bang and a thumb up, and leave your comments down below. Orlando Magic's season preview. Coming up next week, more season preview shows. We will try to sneak some mock drafts in there. October will be jam-packed with ADP battles or something similar to that, a concept we've done for many, many years. We'll have mock drafts for 10s, 12s, 14, 16, 20-team leagues. We'll have points league for Yahoo scoring, ESPN scoring. We will have roto mocks. We will have drafting from every position. All this stuff is coming in the next couple of weeks. Updated sleepers, updated busts, must drafts, do not drafts, late round flyers, whatever. Whatever you can think of, and stuff that I haven't even thought of yet will come out soon. What, in the meantime, we're getting ready for is just we're prepping ourselves. We're getting everything opened up and ready to receive the information. And one of the ways you can use that information that I know that you're going to have is in the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl. I am still taking applications. We have got a lot of them, though. We have pushed over 1,000 total applications. I'm planning to have about 1,200 spots, maybe more. I already had to expand the Roto League out to 180 teams versus 120. And 180 invites have gone out for that already. Again, keep putting in. If you want to be in the Roto League, select it, because I'll push that out even further. I just want as many people in these leagues as possible. Slow drafts. 12-team leagues. Starting October 2nd. You will get an email when the draft order is set. Don't worry. You will get an email when that draft order is set. I'll repeat that again. You will get an email when the draft order is set. These are super fun leagues. They're super engaging. They're including settings which I believe make fantasy basketball better. And I think the overwhelming response from that last season was true. So that is going to be coming again for this upcoming season. We are talking Orlando Magic. Like I said, I'm sure somebody who's got a better grasp of AI has an ability to... Not a better grasp of AI. I've got a decent grasp of AI. I just don't know. I haven't tried this, but I know you can do it. Like the Orlando Magic theme song sung by Michael Bolton. I'm going to investigate that. We'll see. We'll see whether I can do it. I don't know. I probably won't play it on the show, but I'm going to investigate it anyway. So we are here to talk about this Orlando Magic squad. We'll just start off by looking at their projected starting five. This is, I believe, the easiest one to do in the league. Maybe. Yeah, no, it probably is. Jalen Suggs, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and Wendell Carter Jr. I guess you could say, well, maybe Wendell doesn't start. I don't think that's the case. Maybe you could just suggest that Suggs doesn't start. Again, almost impossible that wouldn't be true. This is what they're going to do. These guys are going to play big minutes for Franz, big minutes for Paolo, intermediate 30-ish for KCP. I think Suggs pushes up to around that zone. The question is, I guess, Carter, who never seems to get to 30 minutes, and they signed both of his backup centers again in the offseason, so those guys are still there. And how they decide to run that in that center rotation is going to be something that we have to bring up later. But that, I believe, is a pretty easy, pretty straightforward starting group for the Orlando Magic. Let's take a look at some players who I think at the moment are a little bit undervalued for the Magic. And honestly, with the way that things are sitting in terms of ADPs and rankings, the only one who massively stands out, and even this, I look at it, and I have my projections. Obviously, that's what I do. And I've been working on something in terms of, people ask me, Josh, what are your thoughts on rankings? Why do you have these things punted and not, and why do you look at -1, and what are your weightings? And I've done a lot of work on this yesterday, a lot more on it as well. And at some point, I'm probably going to put a show out regarding weightings and changing rankings and that sort of idea, taking a few things into account. Non-normal distributions, year-to-year variance, game-to-game variance. And we'll talk about that later. But anyway, all that was a side note for me to tell you that all my rankings come out and Jalen Suggs comes up as an undervalued player, and I still look at it and go, is he? How confident do I feel in this? Is it not like, the answer's not really. Like, Suggs' ADP is 96. I think he can be a top 80 player pretty easily, but I know this is going to sound stupid, but what if he's not? What if he isn't? What if he doesn't play the 30 plus minutes that I think he's going to play? What if the steal rate drops, the shooting falls off? There are some here that I feel very confident about. Suggs' ADP on ESPN's 135, easiest win you will ever find. His rank is 114 for category leagues on ESPN, W. His Fantrax ADP 98, I think pretty good. Suggs' value for ESPN points leagues, he's ranked 148th, one of the biggest W's you'll find as well, and an ADP of 135. But I still don't know. He plays his ass off. He's way better at home versus on the road. He's only 23. I think he gets his first opportunity to be a full-time point guard this season. But he only played 27 minutes last season. He only had 20 usage. And when I take flyers on guys in later rounds, one of the things that, if you want to look, small cheat codes, who's a starting point guard who plays 30 minutes with good usage? And I think he's a starting point guard, but I don't know about the minutes and I don't know about the usage. Last season, he averaged 1.4 steals and 0.6 blocks in 27 minutes, which is fantastic. He improved his shooting. He hit 2 threes a game with 13 points, but 2.7 assists as a starting point guard is pretty rough. 3 rebounds is pretty bad as well. He gets it done on the back of steals and blocks and threes and improved percentages, even though those 47 and 76 are not good. But I am expecting in year 4 here for Suggsy that we do get some steps up, but we might not. And again, I go through fine-tooth comb and look at numbers and try and figure this stuff out and go, well, am I confident? Can I push him down? And I still can't. I think he's really good. But there is room, a lot of room for ups and downs for Suggs, for fluctuation. And we're going to get to the risk-reward stuff later on. He isn't the name that I put up because he had one of the largest category variations in best case, worst case, but not as high in the points league one. But like his category variation based on the stats that he puts up, although I've projected for him, is 92 ranking spots. And that's like best case, top 50, worst case, outside top 130. And that is a little worrying. That is a little troublesome. On the other side of the equation for your Orlando Magic is we're looking at guys that are a little bit overvalued, and this might be one of the easiest things that you'll hear anyone say, and that is that, Paolo Banchero probably is overrated or overvalued. And I was going to say spoiler, but it's not a spoiler because who cares? But Paolo is who I'm putting under the lens later on to discuss his game, and this is, again, really obvious. His ADP is 35 on Yahoo, his rank is 37, ESPN's ADP is 24, and even his category rank is 26 on ESPN. I've left that Fantrax ADP on there. That is not correct. Just ignore that. Shouldn't be there. But if you're in a category league, like Paolo at 26 does not make sense. Paolo at 24 does not make sense. Paolo at 35 does not make sense. Paolo at 37 doesn't make a ton of sense. Now, I did just spend $20 on him in an auction draft the other day, and that's where he becomes a confusing player. He's heading into year 3. He's only 22. He averaged 22.5, 7 rebounds, 5.5 assists, 0.9 steals and 0.6 blocks, and it's usually discussed about how Paolo's terrible at defense and terrible at percentages, but 0.9 steals and 0.6 blocks is not Anthony Simons. It's not dreadful. It's not even Kyle Kuzma. It's okay. And we head into year 3, and we have to have some level of hope that I guess some of the stuff improves, but look, if you're looking at pick 24 in an ESPN category draft, you take all upside pretty much, I think, away for this season. I think there are going to be big steps forward for what Paolo does, but can't really do much minutes-wise, 35 minutes. Not sure he does much usage-wise at 30%. It's got to come in like just being more efficient, hitting more threes, hitting more free throws, doing more defensively, and that's not a guarantee. So he does sit there as a somewhat overvalued player. I also think his running mate, Franz Wagner, might be, in certain circumstances, sitting as a little bit overvalued. What have I done here? I've just completely forgotten to remove some of these numbers on this screen. So my apologies. I know this is confusing because some of that is left over from the Kevin Durant stuff from yesterday. Franz Wagner's Yahoo rank at 45. That is his correct rank. That is too high for Wagner. This Fantrax ADP and the points league stuff is about Durant, so ignore that. Apologies. That's, wow, what's going on for me? Sunday morning, not a good start. Franz Wagner ranked at 45 is too high. I think. I think it's too high for Franz. Now, Franz is obviously a good player. Like, I don't think there's much debate about that. Franz is strong, he's solid, he does little bits of everything, but he did shoot really badly from 3 last season. He played 32 minutes. That can actually improve. 26 usage, he averaged 20 points, 5 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1.1 steals, shot 48 and 85, and that's with shooting under 30 from 3. In his first 2 seasons, he shot 36% from 3. And I think, again, people will often get confused at some of the things that I say. I don't sit here and look at Franz and go, well, he shot 36% from 3 for the first 2 seasons, therefore last season's a blip, we ignore it, and he can go back to being he'll just go back to being a 36% guy. That's not what I'm saying. What I object to a lot about Franz is when people say, he can't shoot. I go, yeah, but he could. So do we ignore those 2 seasons and just focus on literally what happened last season? Is that what he is now? Because those 2 things happened. He shot 36% as a starter for 2 consecutive seasons from 3. So my pushback on it is when people go, well, Franz just can't shoot. And I go, it's confusing. It goes up and down. I don't know where he sits. I don't think that I don't know that he's a 36 guy, but I also don't think that we lock in that he's a 29% player. But still, getting him at 45 is too high. I just don't, again, you're taking away upside, you're banking on bunches of improvement, and I'm not sure where that comes. I guess the easy improvement part for him is just playing a couple more minutes, like get to 34, play 35 like Paolo did. And maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But there are easy enough areas that can improve. We already talked Suggs, but people can be overvalued and undervalued at the same time, and I think Suggs is. Because his points league rank, his rank on Yahoo is 85, which for category leagues is okay, but for points leagues is too high. There's just no way that I want to take Jalen Suggs anywhere close to that 85 mark in a Yahoo points league. He's got to be outside the top 100, I think, in that sort of a setting, and 85 is just too high. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. If you are a fan of the NFL, and I'm sure some of you are, well, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You're in the middle of a game, you can also just say, hey, you're watching something, and you go, oh, this is interesting, which way this is going. Check out the stats. You can go check their live play-by-play over on the FanDuel app as well, and it's much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It's not just the NFL, though. I know this ad is telling me that. But NBA futures, NBA awards futures, NBA preseason. Not sure you want to bet too much on that, but it's coming up. We're almost there. Go to FanDuel.com. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. Okay, so we looked at the overvalued guys, the undervalued players. Let's have a squiz at some breakout candidates. And again, this is a relatively nebulous term, breakout players. But the guy that I just wanted to highlight, now, I don't think we need to do much with this. I don't think we need to pay a lot of attention to Jet Howard for the upcoming season. But in terms of the guys who we're not really doing much to think about at the moment, like Franz is there, and Suggs, I would say, broke out last season as an all-defense player and a guy that should have been in the mix for most improved. And I don't think Wendell Carter's breaking out, and Paolo and Franz, like, what's an actual breakout for those? I guess it's possible. I don't think Mr. Black is going to be able to do it. KCP is KCP, like that's what it is. So the one who's like fits a skill set that the Magic need and drafted him high and was absolutely putrid last season is Jet Howard. I would hope. Now, I hated the pick when they picked him at 11. It looks way worse than even my disdain for it. He averaged 1.6 points as a top 12, was he 11th overall, I think, pick. Shout out to the Bulls for giving that pick. He played 4 minutes a night, 23 usage. What the hell do I even take out of what happened with Jet Howard last season? It was just an absolute disaster. But, who are the guys that sit in front of him? Caleb Houston, yeah? I guess rookie Tristan Da Silva, although Howard is more of an on-ball guard versus a plotting forward. Howard, I think, might be able to develop something in terms of some ball handling at some point. I'm not putting any faith in this whatsoever for Jet. Like, I'm not sitting here going, wow, don't have a look at him last round, see what happens. Nah, no way. Absolutely not am I suggesting that. But I'm just saying that it's someone who, honestly, there'll be plenty of you who go, oh, yeah, remember they drafted him a year ago? And he's been out of your mind. And I hope that injuries and form and transition through to playing in the NBA, another one of those ones where, like, yeah, his dad played in the NBA, it should be easy for him to transition. I guess absolutely not, though, because one thing I try to stay away from on this show as much as possible, and in my projections, is trying to get inside people's heads and being like, well, this guy is going to feel this because this guy feels this, and then that guy said this, and then he's going to respond and feel that way. I try not to do that because how would anybody know? So I'm not going to, maybe he's got a grudge and he does this, and maybe he feels this and does this. And I try to just back things up with data. That's why I always do the contract year show, to show that it doesn't do anything. Because I'm not here to like try and guess a psychology of where, and maybe you'll say, well, Josh, you've done this, and that is possible. Maybe I've done it. I do try to avoid that as much as possible. Try to avoid the idea of reading another man's mind and figuring out how they're going to work mentally. It's hard. I can't even figure it out myself mentally, let alone somebody else. So that's one of those things that I'm not going to sit here and say, well, because Jet Howard's dad played in the NBA and all this experience, he's going to be awesome to transition straight away, because that obviously didn't happen. I'm not saying that everyone said that, but there's definitely people who did. Let's take a look at the rotation ideas and where we could trip up, where the risks could fall for this Magic team. And I've already mentioned one of them, and that is Jalen Suggs potentially just playing 27 minutes again. Maybe they like him 27 minutes a night. They like the energy that he plays at that level, preserving some of his health, Alex Caruso style. And I said, well, yeah, we'll use Anthony Black. We've still got Cole Anthony who can run that, and that is a legitimate risk. But last season, Suggs didn't play point guard full time, so I just be very interesting to see what they do. One of the other risks is, what if they just say, well, Jonathan Isaac, you are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I don't even know how long it is now, removed from that last knee surgery. What if your limit is just, maybe you don't have one anymore? What if they say they're going to play Isaac, and he doesn't have restrictions, and he's a 27-minute-a-night player? Well, he's a clear must-draft player if that was to happen, and I don't think it will, but it could. But that's something, again, that would really screw up things like value for the centers and Wendell Carter and Goga and Mo Wagner and players like that. Because if Isaac is doing more and out there for more minutes, and maybe that impacts a Franz Wagner, or Franz has to play more at the 2, and that means rebound numbers drop, or whatever it is, that all that stuff is a risk. As for Isaac, like last season, they were very careful with him. He played just, 16 minutes a night? But he still averaged 0.7 steals and 1.2 blocks. Let's just throw like 50% extra onto that, 24 minutes a night. That's a steal. It's 1.8 blocks. That basically makes you draftable. He shot 51% from the field. He shot 72 from the line. 0.7 threes, again, let's throw 50% on that. That's a 3 a game. 10 points, 1 3, 6 rebounds, 1 steal, 1.8 blocks. That's a top 60 player. Maybe top 80 player, I don't know, about that. So does Isaac get 24 a night? Do they just say, we love what you do defensively? And they should. He's right in the prime of his career at 27, obviously with a million injuries and soft tissue things and ligament things, which are troubling. And I'm not suggesting that we need to get excited about drafting him, but I think he's got to be a last-round target, John Isaac, just because there is a possibility. There is a chance that they just say, we are playing him more. And the other thing is, when we talk Wendell Carter and the rotation risks at the center, they brought back Goga. They brought back Mo Wagner. Now, Carter will be the starter, I'm guessing, and starting John Isaac at center in the playoffs did not work very well at all. So I think Carter will start, and what we saw last season is that Mo Wagner would get the backup minutes and Goga would be there as an emergency player, but they prioritized re-signing, and I think Goga's quite a good player. He's a really good defensive center. Do we get a level of clarity where it's 28 of Carter and 19 of Wagner and a little bit of small ball with Isaac? Or do we get like this back and forward, and sometimes Wagner and Goga play together, sometimes Goga starts? It could be the risk of there is clarity to improve the value of Carter, or it's muddier and we just don't know what to do with any of these guys. I think that risk could possibly go like either way would be the risk associated there, I think. Today's episode is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and guess what? Patience. Yeah, they are the ingredients to a fantasy championship, an NBA championship, but also it's what keeps your ride or die / car alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle, to level it up, exhaust kits, brakes, LED headlights, livery, you say livery or livery for like stickers on the outside? I don't know. Speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has everything that you need with over 122 million parts available for whatever car it is that you're looking to work on. eBay Motors has all that stuff there. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, well, you know that you are going to get a part that fits your car every time, or else you get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers. Okay, so looked at the rotation risks. We've looked at breakouts and undervalueds and overvalued. So let's get the magnifying glass out. Let's put Paolo Banchero under the lens. We've already spoken a little bit about Paolo earlier in this show. Let's take a look at some of the numbers that exist for him. Obviously, made the All-Star team as a second-year player. There are some that will say he's incredibly overrated. There are some that say, no, look what he's doing as a second-year player, carrying this load and lifting this team to within a shot of being a home court advantage team in the playoffs. And I think both sides of that are true. You'd be shocked to know that on Crafted NBA, his most similar offensive player was Julius Randle. You will also not be shocked to know that his most similar defensive player was Josh Giddey. I think that's some of the easiest comparisons you'll ever find. The overall comparison of Ja Morant's a little weird, but look at that sky-high free throw rate for a second-year player and a big man. Incredible. Load and creation as a power forward. Absolutely insane. His regularized adjusted defensive turnover rate down the bottom there, that RADTOV, really high, which is interesting because we don't think of him as a steals guy and a defensive guy, and his deflection numbers are super low. But he's doing something. And like I said earlier, those steal and block numbers they're not great, but they're not dreadful. And it's a little encouraging. His rim frequency is not bad. His rim defense is not bad. It's still got plenty of room for improvement. His shooting, though, is where we get to the problems. Very low true shooting, really low shot quality, really low three-point attempt rate, really high turnovers. His creation to turnover ratio is really bad. But a lot of that stuff improves. And one of the comps I had for Paolo coming out of the draft was Detroit Blake Griffin. Not Clippers Blake Griffin, not high-flying 20 and 10 double-double guy, but Detroit Blake Griffin, a guy that worked and improved his shot, a guy that improved his passing to become like a point forward, and Paolo's already come in with that part of it. Now, there's no guarantee to suggest that because I comp those guys together, that now Paolo is going to improve as a shooter the way that Blake did. And every time I say Blake, I always think of that. Have you seen that? I don't know. It was on a late night show and Jamie Foxx was doing a Doc Rivers impression. So it's not Blake's fault. Every time I think of Blake Griffin, that's all I think. But not to say that Blake couldn't, we didn't know that Blake was going to improve, and we don't know whether Paolo will as well, but it's interesting. That radar chart on the right-hand side shows the play type most used offensively, and the fact that pick and roll ball handler is just the biggest by a large margin, followed by ISO. Is that a sustainable level for Banchero? To be the guy running all of the pick and rolls? Don't know. Not that they brought in someone who's going to do more of that. It's not Suggs' thing. It's definitely not KCP's thing. So it probably sticks, but is this part of the reason why the three-point attempt rate is low and the shooting is low? Because he's doing stuff that's quite different for a big man. I would say that there is a part of that is true. We'll start with that graph on the right for the next one, which is his free throw percentage progression. As we know, Darko it tells you what has happened with a level of future projection in there. And what I don't like about this Darko free throw progression is that the fact that started off in that mid to high 70s and now we sit in the low 70s. So it's not the indicators and the way that it's trying to progress and project Paolo's free throw percentage is saying, yeah, maybe not maybe it's not improving. Maybe we are sticking here. And that was one of the things that Blake was able to do better. He's become like a 78, 77 free throw guy. And at the moment, this is 2 years in. This does not determine the career trajectory of Paolo, but it is heading in the wrong way and it is going down, and that is a concern. There are two players at the moment that Banchero, and about a week ago, this was dominating Twitter NBA conversations through some of the worst accounts you'll ever find, which is pretty standard to see those things pop up on your For You page. Talking about like people fighting about Paolo versus Scotty Barnes. The other comp you get with Paolo all the time, and this, I guess, more pushes into the fantasy circles, is Julius Randle. So I thought, let's put those guys together. And there are two things that I used here on this graph on the left-hand side. The y-axis is the three-point pull-up field goal attempts, which is self-created three-pointers. You got the ball in your hand, you're dribbling up, bang, shoot it. And the x-axis is what percentage of the time are you on ball and running the offense? It is staggering to me to see how far ahead Paolo is of both of those guys. The Randle one being on ball, we get because Brunson was there and Randle's numbers were probably high in the past. But I think most people would have expected that Scotty Barnes was way higher than this. Like, that's over 30% for Banchero and under 22 for Scotty in terms of percentage on ball. 3-point pull-ups per 75 for Scott is like 1.2, 1.1. Paolo's at like 2.7. It's like double. And does like Paolo take some of that on-ball percentage away? Does he stop with the 3-point pull-ups, which aren't working as well? Which, again, we criticize Julius Randle for bad shot selection. I'm not even saying that these are bad shots for Paolo. They might be. But that is a pretty stark difference between Paolo and Scotty and Randle in terms of how much he's on the ball, how many of these self-created threes that he's taking, and if he pulls it back to those guys' areas, does that improve his numbers? Maybe. The last thing is one, I think I've tweeted this out actually. This is the Paolo Banchero radar chart fantasy comparisons, and obviously the top two names are Kyle Kuzma and Julius Randle, guys with iffy percentages and lower defensive stats. But it doesn't always work the same way because, again, some of the way that I look at rankings and formulas that I use is the next two guys are Jason Tatum and Scotty Barnes. You'll say, but Tatum shoots really well from the line. That is true. And you'll say Barnes blocks a lot of shots, and I'll say that is true. But I will also tell you that free throw percentage, steals, and blocks are the most variable categories year on year, week on week, game on game. So I don't put as large a focus on those when considering valuations of players because that can end up burning you a ton. And that's why there's a similarity between those guys. Obviously, the best similarities are going to be Kuzma and Randle, but the overall sort of shape, whether it's higher or lower, but the shape and the ratio between all these things puts Paolo similar to Kuzma, Randle, Tatum, Barnes as that group of guys on that chart that you can see there. So we've looked at under the lens stuff. What should we flip it over to now? It's time for us to look at injury concerns and if there's anything we need to be massively worried about on this squad. For the most part, there are a couple of things. Well, obviously one of them is John Isaac and his injuries. Does he just sit all back-to-backs? I think he played one or two last season. I would expect that he just does continue to sit most back-to-backs as they try and preserve him. Gary Harris, his lower body / hamstring always seems to be cooked. At the moment, though, with KCP there, they don't have to rely upon Harris to do what he did last season, which was play 24 minutes a night. But his numbers have changed so much. He's at 12% usage, Gaz. They re-signed him to be a backup. He's 30 now. 7 points, but rebounds, assists, doesn't do it. Steals, still pretty good for 24 minutes at 0.9, but not ideal. Not the elite free throw guy that he used to be. Like, that value that Gaz used to have has definitely disappeared, but hopefully now in his smaller role, he's able to remain healthier. And then Jalen Suggs hurt his ankle many times last season. It's just the style of play that he has out there. But I just think we look at that, and again, it's part of my, like, not reticence, but I look at the projections and go, yeah, but, like, what if he just keeps putting himself in harm's way and getting hurt with the way that he plays? And I can't rule that out. And it just is a small level of queasiness, I guess, in that. Let's take a look at the Orlando Magic's schedule, and it's almost a yearly tradition to look at the Magic's schedule and be like, "Oh, that's pretty bad." I'm not even talking about games in playoff week, although we've got that here as well. They play only 45 quality games. The lowest number of quality games for any team is 44, so it's basically the bottom of the barrel. Meaning when you're looking at Suggs or taking Isaac or Carter or Wagner, whoever it is that from them compared to most other teams and other players that they're playing on the higher volume days. It's a little bit of a mark against it. On the positive side, they've only got 13 back-to-backs, which is important for John Isaac. They've got 14 maximum game weeks, which is in the middle. But in the playoffs, if you use my projected schedule or my recommended schedule finishing on March the 23rd, week one of those playoffs, they've got a 2-game week. Now, I don't like a 2-game week in the playoffs, especially in the second round or third round. I hate that. In the first round, I'm not going to be as critical of it because hopefully your team is good enough to be able to beat who you're playing, or you're in a situation where you've got to bye. And also, these guys are not players that are in the first round. I don't want to take a first or probably second round player with a 2-game week. That is not ideal. But if I'm getting a fourth round guy with a 2-game week, I'm okay with it. But if you use any other playoff schedule, you won't have the 2-game week problem. So if you use my schedule, they go 2-4-3. That's really quite bad. 9 games. If you use the March 30 finish, it's 4-3-4. That's 11 games. Big change. Yahoo's recommended, or Yahoo's default is that nonsense schedule, so that's 3-4-3. And ESPN's default is 3-4-3-4, which is about, it's fine. It's normal. It's nothing majorly interesting. Let's take a look at some of the younger guys, the under 23s on this team, and see what we're going to pay attention to there, and use my Bazemore Dynasty metric to have a look at where they sit for a 5-year rebuild scenario. I do have Paolo very high as a top 10 player. Again, I don't know what happens with his defense or if the shooting ever improves, but there are so many positive indicators about Paolo, what he's doing with usage at this age and experience and all that stuff that puts him that high. I would guess if you're in a category dynasty, no one is pricing him that high, meaning maybe there's a little bit of scope as I say buy low, it sounds stupid, but maybe. The guys who, there's maybe a little bit more intrigue with because we just haven't seen them or people don't speak about them that much. Already talked about Jett Howard. Interestingly, his Bazemore came out decent despite no numbers at all last season, the top 175. And a guy that I thought really struggled last season was Mr. Black. And Anthony Black came out as a top 175 dynasty player as well. He's 6'7" as a point guard, 13 usage. He started games last season, and I just thought, look, I did not, again, always a caveat, so you understand where I come from. I did not like him as a prospect. I would never have taken him in the top 10. I had Cason Wallace very clearly ahead of him in that draft. So I'm going to look at this and go, yeah, of course he's bad. I thought he was going to be bad from taking him at that spot situation. So I'm always going to come at it that way. There are a couple of things that were interesting. Half a steal in 17 minutes is okay, but 1.3 assists. What? He actually shot the 3 ball okay, but no volume. 4 points, 2 rebounds. The appeal of him was like Alfred Payton-ish. Get me some rebounds and some assists with some steals. The shooting and the usage is going to be really bad. I think it was way worse than you expected. Now, in year 2, he is a second-year guard, and I do like a second-year guard. I like a second-year guard who's got an opportunity and has got usage, and he has neither of those things, so I'm not going to get excited there. I don't think there's any way that Black comes out and supplants Jalen Suggs as a starter. Not at all. In fact, he's still got to overtake Cole Anthony really for backup minutes. But there is a little bit of dynasty appeal there for Anthony Black as a top 175 guy. There are just too many negative pressure points around his game. The other guy who is under 23 on this team is Caleb Houston, who is tall. He's a shooter. I've got him top 350, and I think he's at real risk of losing his role to either Jett Howard or their draftee Tristan Da Silva. And you'll notice I'm not talking about Da Silva in the under 23 list because he is not under 23. He was a first-round draft pick that I do not like as a long-term prospect. He is a guy that at the age of 23, or I think might have been 22 at the time as a senior at Colorado, put up okay numbers, bullying 18-year-old kids. He put up some good numbers in a few games in Summer League, shooting 63% from 3, I think it was, which of course is never going to hold. I also don't see where Da Silva fits in this rotation with Wagner and Banchero there. And Isaac, is he maybe 15 minutes a night off the bench? I don't know, but I will use this to just talk about Da Silva because I'm just not there. He's 23, he's 6'9", he played 34 minutes at Colorado, 23 usage. He averaged 16, 5, and 2. Under 2 threes, 49 and 84. They're fine numbers. They're all totally okay. Totally okay. And maybe he's able to step into a rotation role straight away. Also, maybe he's not. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's like past 22, 23-year-old players who put up good numbers in college and suck in the NBA. Ochai Agbaji, I'm looking at you. I have not liked the Magic's drafting strategy the last 2 years. Howard, no. Black, no. De Silva, no. I didn't like any of them. We'll see how they work out, but I am not considering De Silva as a high-level dynasty guy. I'm not considering De Silva as any level redraft player, and we'll see where they position him in their rotation for this coming season. I just think his upside is incredibly mid, which is not what I like in a draft prospect. Although, it's a bad draft, so who knows. Risk versus reward, I already told you earlier, I think, about where we're looking at that, because there was variance in Jalen Suggs, but there's pretty big variance in Franz Wagner as well, whose category variance was about 84 ranking spots and his points league variance was about 62, which I didn't really look at Franz and think, well, yeah, he's a big variance guy, he's a huge risk. Part of my issue with him being that 47th rank on Yahoo is my best case had him at like 40th, which is like that's absolute best case scenario based on my projections, of course, which can be all over the shop. But there is risk reward in his type of game when you're sort of sitting mid-pack in a lot of different areas. If one of those things drops off, or a couple of them, the threes don't come back and then he gets scared to take them, all that stuff can become it can become a problem. The last part we look at is the over-the-hill guys who's old, who's at risk of age-related decline. And this is not a super old team. There are 3 guys over the age of 29, including someone who is going to come in and step into their starting lineup as their prized, one of the biggest free agency signings in Magic recent history, and that's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. KCP is going to start. He obviously comes across from Denver. He's 32 this season, 6'5" wing. Guards, point guards as well. 13 usage only last season, played 32 minutes. He averaged 10, 2.5, and 2.5. Yuck. 1.3 steals is nice. 1.6 threes, you'd hope he's 2.7 threes, but only 1.6, because the Nuggets never took threes, and you know who else never took threes? The Magic. So is he going to take more threes? Not guaranteed. Does he go to a situation where he gets more shots now that he plays alongside Suggs, Paolo, and Franz? Probably not, because he was playing with Porter, Jokic, and Murray, and your passing ability to get him open is not as high on the Magic as it was in Denver. He's a good free throw guy, but never takes them. He's just the absolute definition of fantasy mid, KCP. He's mid. Like, you will see a season-long ranking for him, especially if you include like a 9-cat number and you go, he's actually 101st. What a great target. And you look at every single category and it's below average, or in the case of like free throw percentage, it's above average on like 1 attempt a game. And the steals are good, but we also know putting your eggs in the steals are going to hold basket is a terrible strategy. You can still be great and go to good, or good and go to above average, but keeping the level is impossible to do. Oh no, it's not impossible, but it's it's the thing that I would least want to put my reliance on. And he is 32. And we did see steps back. And defensively, you'll hear Nuggets fans, some of it is coping, but some of it is also reality. And I'll say, well, he was just bad defensively. And he got outplayed by Christian Braun defensively in the playoffs. So, yeah, we are not drafting old mate KCP, I don't think, in 12-team leagues. I do not see the purpose of that. There's no reason for that, I don't believe. Corey Joseph also, for some reason, exists on this team, and he somehow has invoked the good bloke clause to remain in the league for the last... Do you even know who Corey Joseph played for last season? Because I'm going to be totally honest with you. I can't remember. I know he was with Golden State for a period of time, and then I believe he got waived. I think that's what happened. And then he didn't end up on a team at the end of last season. He's been bad for so many years. And at least now there's guys ahead of him, meaning he's not going to play, which is a gigantic W. The only player I think that who's going to be a rotation guy who I haven't... Well, there's actually 2 of them, and we'll talk about them now, that I haven't really spoken about. One of them is Cole Anthony, who started out last season unbelievably on fire. Unbelievably. And then it all disappeared. He's still only 24, Cole. He played 22 minutes a night with 24 usage, averaging 12 points and 4 rebounds and 3 assists. Low defensive stats. He's had good steal numbers in the past, but 44 and 83. To me, he has been one of the guys like a Quickly and a Kobe White who, if you get a chance to start, I think they'd put up good numbers. But that is probably no chance of happening here. I would say that he is somewhat out of their long-term plans, Cole. But still, like, what I wanted was for him to go to the Spurs last season and start there. I thought it would have been awesome. But he's a guy that I haven't given up hope for, but I don't see how anything is coming of this for Cole this season, unless, again, there's a trade, and trying to plan for a trade to unlock someone's fantasy value is a really tough thing to do. You can't do anything about it. You're not going to hold and stash and wait for that to come to pass. That just isn't a good way of doing it. One of the other guys that is starting for this team, I expect, is Wendell Carter Jr., who hurt his hand early in the season and his numbers suffered as a result all the way through. 11-7, doesn't block shots anymore, even though he used to be a really good shot blocker. Used to be a good passer as well, and that's disappeared. 53-69 is his percentages are not very good, and he only played 26 minutes a night with 17 usage. And given that Goga and Mo Wagner are back, and John Isaac is around, I'm not sure that Wendell does more than that. I don't think there's high upside in Wendell anymore. I used to really like him. I think he's a really good defender still, and quite an interesting player. But the ability to generate the fantasy stats that we want, I don't really think are there. And I think we're going to be in one of those scenarios again as a fantasy community where there's just too much frustration and there's no point, I don't think, in getting him. I also haven't given you numbers on his primary backup, I think, is Mo Wagner, who's a high usage, high efficiency player off the bench. Like 60 field goals and 81 free throws is the stuff that rotisserie people bust through the seams of the front of their pants looking at. He's never going to block a shot, but 11-4, that's points and rebounds, half a three. He's 27. He's a guy that when he plays 24 minutes a night, that efficiency, scoring, and rebounds is enough to use. But as a backup, probably not. But you're always knowing that when you're in a head-to-head matchup in a category format, you go, man, I really need someone to help me boost my field goals for the week, and they don't hurt my free throws. Well, this is going to be the guy that sits there basically all the time. That's what he does. According to advanced metrics, one of the best defenders all of last season was the Magic's third-string center, the Dart himself, Goga Bitadze, who's only 25. He only played 15 minutes a night. He blocked 1.2 shots in 15 minutes. Of course, just do the double game. Hit to 30 minutes. That's 2.4. That's great. He shot 60 from the field. 5 rebounds in 15 minutes. Like, we're talking a 10-10 two-block player as a starter. Maybe not. He probably wouldn't play 30 minutes. But as we saw last season, he started when Wendell would go down. And then when Wendell returned, he would be out of the rotation. And I'm not really sure why we should expect much different for this upcoming season. Maybe we do. Maybe we get something different for Bitadze. But I would expect that it's the same thing. And I also think that Goga might be in demand Knicks looking for someone to be a center. If Goga Bitadze went to the Knicks, I think he could unseat Mitchell Robinson. Well, he couldn't because Tibbs is stubborn, but he'd be an interesting guy if Robbo went down. Interesting player. That'll cover it for the Orlando Magic. If we just do a little bit of a summary on things, Paolo obviously is the big name here, but there are going to be some of you who swear that you would not touch him in the top 100 because you are beholden to straight 9 category rankings, which are incredibly full of flaws. There'll be some of you who suggest that you might even go second round in a category league, which I also think is a process that's full of flaws. In a points league, I think he's obviously really, really good, and I don't really see massive amounts changing in terms of how much he has the ball, which is great in terms of getting that value. Franz is a mid-round guy who's mid across the board in many numbers, who I am not saying is a bad shooter, but I'm not guaranteeing is a good one. I think Suggs is going to do more. I like him late. I'm not interested in Wendell Carter, pretty obviously. I'm not interested in the Howards or Blacks or De Silva. I don't want to draft KCP. In fact, this is a team where I think there's 3 guys who are 12-team league players, Paolo, Franz, and Suggs. And I think Isaac probably should go in those last 3 rounds just to see. Because 25 minutes of John Isaac is enough to be a very clear rosterable player. But if he's playing 50 games, then that makes it very hard to hold on. In a points league, we wouldn't even bother considering what Isaac can do. We need to see what they decide they're going to do with Cole Anthony. Does Mr. Black step up into a larger role? There's some question marks, but that's probably where we sit with this Magic team. Hit the thumbs up. Leave a comment. I hope you're ready for just an unbelievable amount of stuff, which I hope is entertaining, informative, pushing the boundaries, innovative, doing research. That's what we do here. Try and bring new information out rather than regurgitating basic stuff. And I hope that comes across. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.